Dawn Sturgess fell ill on Saturday, the 30th of June, 2018. She died some days later on the 8th of July in Salisbury District Hospital. The medical cause of her death was hypoxic ischemic brain injury and intracranial brain hemorrhage attributable to Novichok poisoning. The immediate circumstances of her death are now clear, but also quite extraordinary. On the morning of Saturday, the 30th of June 2018, Dawn and her partner, Charlie Rowley, were together at Charlie's flat in Amesbury. Charlie gave Dawn a gift of what was labelled as, and he believed to be, a small bottle of Nina Ricci perfume. He removed the packaging and attached the dispensing pump to the bottle, and using the pump, Dawn applied the substance inside the bottle, which she believed to be perfume, to her wrists, and she may well also have inhaled some of the vapours of the substance. In fact, the substance in that bottle was a deadly nerve agent from the Novichok class of organophosphate toxins. Dawn became seriously ill very quickly. Charlie called an ambulance and paramedics attended the flat. By the time they arrived, Dawn's heart had stopped beating for some time. Although the paramedics managed to resuscitate her, she had sustained unsurvivable brain injury. She received expert medical treatment in hospital, but she never regained consciousness and died some days later, as I've said, on the 8th of July. Appropriate medical care, both from the ambulance staff who responded to the emergency call and also from the hospital doctors. Having heard expert medical evidence, I'm quite sure that no medical treatment could have saved her life. The question that obviously arises is where the perfume bottle containing deadly nerve agent had come from. I'm satisfied that the answer to that question lies in events that had taken place some miles away from Amesbury, in Salisbury, and 4 months before Dawn fell ill. That is to say, on the weekend of the 3rd and 4th of March 2018. I've examined those events, those earlier events, in great detail. And in the light of all the evidence that I've received, as I say, both the open and the closed material, I am sure, that is to say, I'm satisfied beyond reasonable doubt of the following facts about the events of that earlier weekend in March. First, that weekend, an attempt was made to assassinate Sergei Skripal. Skripal was a Russian man living in Salisbury who was a former member of the Russian military intelligence known as the GRU. In 2006, that's 12 years earlier, he had been convicted in Russia on charges of spying for Britain, and he'd been imprisoned. In 2010, still 8 years earlier, he had been pardoned by Russia, and he came as part of a prisoner exchange to live in the United Kingdom. Second, 3 Russian men who were members of GRU Unit 29155 travelled to this country on Friday the 2nd of March 2018 using aliases Petrov, Bosharov and Fedotov. They came to the UK with the intention of working together to kill Sergei Skripal, and they planned to kill him using Novichok. Third, the assassination attempt itself was carried out by 2 of them, Petrov and Bosharov. They travelled to Salisbury on Saturday the 3rd of March, carried out reconnaissance of Sergei Skripal's house and the area around it. They came back to Salisbury the next day, Sunday the 4th of March, and they put Novichok on the handle of Sergei Skripal's front door with the intention that he would touch the door handle and be killed by the poison. The details of their movements are set out extensively in the report. When they did that, they must have been aware that others might also touch the door handle. Most obviously Sergei's daughter Yulia, who they knew was staying at the house at the time, but also any neighbour, visitor, delivery person, or anybody else who might chance by. Fourth, I'm satisfied that Petrov and Bosharov brought with them to Salisbury the Nina Ricci bottle containing Novichok, made in Russia, that was subsequently responsible for Dawn Sturgess's death. It was probably this bottle that they used to apply the poison to Sergei Skripal's door handle. Then, before leaving Salisbury, they recklessly discarded this bottle in some public or semi-public place. They can simply have had no regard at all to the hazard thus created, hazard of death or serious injury to an uncountable number of unconnected and innocent people. Fifth and finally, Petrov, Bosharov and Fedotov were, as I've said, members of an operational team within the GRU. I am sure that in conducting this attack on Sergei Skripal, they must have been acting on instructions received from their superiors. And I've concluded that the operation to assassinate Sergei Skripal must have been authorised at the highest level, indeed by President Putin. Moving on, I'm sure that Charlie Rowley, Dawn's partner, later came into possession of the discarded bottle of Novichok. Probably he found it somewhere. It's impossible to say exactly where and when he acquired it, but it is likely that it was within a few days of the bottle being abandoned on the 4th of March 2018. He, of course, had no idea that its contents were toxic. Whenever and wherever he acquired it, I'm sure that the perfume bottle containing Novichok that Charlie Rowley gave to Dawn Sturgess on the morning of the 30th of June 2018 with fatal consequences had been brought to Salisbury and then discarded there by Petrov and Bosharov on the 4th of March. I've considered whether Dawn Sturgess's death might have been either caused by or contributed to by conduct or failings on the part of the British authorities. The contention has been advanced on behalf of Russia that the Novichok might have emanated from the British and have been used in a deliberate attempt falsely to pin responsibility on Russia. That contention I've examined thoroughly, and the reasoning is set out in the report. But it's a contention that cannot stand up for reasons which are explained in detail in that report. There is overwhelming evidence to support my findings that the Novichok was brought to Salisbury by Russian GRU officers for the purpose of the attack on Sergei Skripal and then discarded there, later causing the death of Dawn Sturgess. Next, questions were very properly raised on behalf of Dawn Sturgess's family as to whether the British authorities ought to have done more to protect Sergei Skripal. I've considered this issue with particular care. I have concluded that there were some failings in Sergei Skripal's management as an exchanged prisoner. In particular, sufficient regular written risk assessments were not carried out. But I am persuaded that these failings did not have any causative effect. The assessment was made that there was not a sufficient risk of an attempt at assassination on British soil by Russian agents, and that was not unreasonable in the circumstances of the time. We're talking about 2010 to 2018. Circumstances, geopolitical circumstances, were a little different from now. Some of the suggested precautions would not have prevented the kind of professional attack which was launched in any event. The arrangements which were made for Sergei Skripal took account of his own wishes, but were not dictated by them. It cannot be said that the British authorities ought to have adopted much more extreme security measures for him in effect, such as to isolate or hide him completely. I've also separately considered whether public health advice ought to have been issued sometime in the period between the Salisbury incident in March and the Amesbury incident in June, to the effect that members of the public shouldn't pick up anything that they hadn't themselves dropped. I've concluded that a decision was taken not to issue such advice at that time, largely because of the danger of causing widespread public fear and panic over a then undefinable area. And that decision was a reasonable one at the time that it was made. So, in summary, the conclusion of the report is that Dawn Sturgess died an innocent victim of an attempt by officers of a Russian state organization to conduct an assassination on the streets of Salisbury using a highly toxic nerve agent. The conduct of Petrov and Bolsharov and their GRU superiors and those who authorized the mission, up to and including, as I found, President Putin, that conduct was astonishingly reckless. There is a direct causal link between the actions of all those individuals and Dawn Sturgess's death. And they, and only they, bear moral responsibility for it.